Hello, this is Pastor Frank Lewis, and welcome to another program in which I am talking about identity. And I'm talking about identity and digging into it in such a way as it'll be able to help you know what happened to your identity, what's happened to everybody in the world's identity, and why you do the things you do, and why all the people around you do the things they do. And today I'm going to look further into this to get a better understanding of this thing called the false self. And I talked to you, and you've heard about the false self, and today we're going to dig into it. And the false self is the version of you that was formed not from the truth of God and how you were formed and how God made you, but from childhood wounds. As I said last week. It is the identity you develop to cope, survive, and protect yourself when your emotional needs were not met by your parents as a child. And this is what's happening if you're not emotionally more healed, then this is what's going to happen with your children. And the truth is, the false self you had to create to survive is not who God created you to be. That's just a fact. It's not who God created you to be. And it is who you had to become in order to feel safe. Children need to be safe, accepted, and valued. You had to create a false self to feel safe, accepted, and valued. And I'm going to look further and deeper into this whole understanding of what is a false self. But before I do, I want to tell you about the book I wrote. I wrote this book called The Key. It is the key to getting out of, what did I say? Find freedom from emotional bondage. And so this book is the book that's the foundation of everything that I do. The key is for emotional healing. I've told you over and over again, you need to be emotionally healed. You can get this book on Amazon, and I suggest you get it because there are answers to questions you've had for a long time. I also have a YouTube channel, and the name of it is Relationships Revealed with Pastor Frank Lewis. Relationships Revealed with Pastor Frank Lewis. So those two things will help you, but then I also have a website, and that's how you can get in touch with me. And it's called identityrestored.net. Identityrestored, all one word, .net. And there's a want help opportunity, so you can get in touch with me, and because I can help you and would love to help you if you so desired. Now I'm going to look deeper at what is this false self? And where does it come from? How is it formed? Why is it formed? Every child is born with a true, God-given identity. They are open, connected, and you stop and think about it. A baby has a clean slate. There is no identity to a brand new born baby has no identity. They have to create a self within 2.5 to 3 years. So they absorb everything. God created little babies and infants and toddlers, small children, to absorb everything. So whatever you were raised in, the environment you were raised, or however you're raising your children, that's creating their identity. And the baby having a clean slate gets that slate filled up with the environment. And so you were designed to be loved, you were designed to be connected and secure. But that didn't happen, and it doesn't happen because Satan, as the god of this world, causes it not to happen. But when any child experiences rejection, neglect, shame, criticism, abandonment, fear, or emotional disconnection, they do not have the mental capacity. See, that's the key. They don't have the mental ability or capacity to process pain in a healthy way. See, there's emotional pain that comes from all those things I just mentioned. Instead, the child thinks, what do I need to become? What do I need to become so whatever painful event I'm experiencing doesn't happen again? Nobody wants that painful events to come again. So what does the child do? They morph, they change who God made them to become whoever they need to be to survive, because they don't want to feel that pain anymore. What I do need to become, what do I need to become to avoid the pain is the beginning of the creation of the false self. What do I need? How do I get away? How do I do differently to avoid the pain? And so the false self is, we have to understand the false self is created for survival. God made human beings and they can't handle pain, and so they just do whatever it takes to be able to avoid it or become whoever they need to be in order not to feel it again. Every child who has experienced pain develops a false self, and that is who they become. What do I need to become in order to survive? The false self is a protective strategy. It is trying to avoid that pain. And the strategy is, if I perform, I will be loved. If I stay quiet, I won't be rejected. If I take care of everyone else, I will matter. I will have value. If I stay in control, I won't get hurt. If I don't feel, I won't be overwhelmed by feelings. The problem is these are not conscious decisions. I need you to really understand that. These are not conscious decisions. These are subconscious, below conscious thought decisions and adaptations. When there is pain in a child's environment, their home life, these subconscious adaptations help the child to survive. And the child needs to survive. That's how God made human beings, is to survive. But as the baby, infant, toddler, and small child grow up, these adaptations begin to replace their true self. In other words, as they start to come through baby, infant, toddler, and small child, during that whole time, they're absorbing all of this. And if they have pain and they suffer in their environment, then what's going to happen is they're going to create a false self. And they're going to lose their true self. And so what does the false self look like? The false self often is seen as a personality. Like I said before, it looks like personality traits, but underneath them are emotional wounds. Underneath these, the false self is emotional wounds. So they're really not personality traits. They're really the result of having to create a way to be able to survive. Common expressions of the false self include the people pleaser. That may be you. Wasn't me, was my wife, however. Always saying yes because they're afraid of rejection. The performer. You might be a performer. Striving for approval through achievement. That was me. The perfectionist. Trying to avoid failure at all costs. Setting the bar too high. Always being disappointed, but having unrealistic standards for themselves and others. The caregiver, taking responsibility for everyone else's emotions. The controller, managing everything. That was me, the controller. The avoider, withdrawing to prevent pain. The tough one. Oh, I see so many people that act tough. I acted tough, using anger and strength to hide vulnerability. They don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to be known. And because they don't like who they are. The invisible one, staying small to avoid attention and any kind of pain. These are not your identity. They weren't my identity. But they are roles I learned to play, you learned to play to survive. Well, what's at the core of the false self? What is the core? At its root, the false self is based on beliefs, it's built on beliefs about yourself that are not true. The problem is that you believe things because of all your painful childhood experiences. So here's the problem. They're not true, but they're true for you. They were true for me. I lived my whole life until I got into an understanding that's in the book. I lived my whole life as a false self. And I married a woman who was a false self. Two false selves getting together. Can you imagine? How's that going to work? But that's probably your situation. It's most of the situations in our world and in the body of Christ. And so examples of false beliefs are, I'm not enough. I'm way over the top, too much. I don't matter. That's a big one. I'm unlovable. I have to earn love. I can't trust anyone, and I'm on my own, so I must take care of myself. And that's that independent part that I needed. And unfortunately, we have that's kind of our basis of in the United States. Any one of those examples of false belief become internal scripts that shapes all of our decisions. It shapes the relationships we choose. It shapes our emotional reactions. Most people that have a false self can't have self-control. It shapes their view of God. It shaped my view of God. It probably shapes your view of God. I'm sure it does, as a matter of fact. And it's shaped my sense of worth, and it shapes your sense of worth. Because you internalized or absorbed things in your home environment, the way you were raised, which threatened you, the experience created out of necessity for survival beliefs, and they become your identity. It's a false identity, but they become an identity. False, but still an identity. The false self compared to the real self. Let's look at this for a second. The false self is driven by fear. It's built on performance. It's motivated by need and a need for approval. It is focused on self-protection. It's emotionally reactive. I mean, man, I used to blow up to keep people pushed away. Or it shuts down, just the opposite. It's rooted in wounds. The true self is rooted and grounded in God's love. It's secure and grounded. It's emotionally honest and vulnerable. See, the true self does nothing to hide. No fig leaves for the true self, like Adam and Eve sowed. Free to connect at a deep level and free to love at a deep level. Guided by truth, not fear, and aligned with who God made me and you to be. Okay? That's the true self. The false self says, I have to become someone else to be loved, accepted, and approved. The true self rests in, I am already loved, so I can be who I really am. Boy, there's a big difference there. Why is the false self a problem for us as adults? The truth is, the false self you created subconsciously to help you survive your childhood, and what I did also, creates problems for you, and it did for me as an adult, and it has. It causes you to be in unhealthy relationships. You pick the wrong husband, you pick the wrong wife, you pick the wrong friends, you pick the wrong job. It causes you to have emotional triggers and be reactive. That was me. And reactivity comes from the false self. It causes anxiety and control issues. It causes fear of intimacy. Into me you see. I'm not talking about sexual. I'm talking about into me you see. Vulnerability, transparency, being known at a deep level. It leads to burnout and exhaustion. Why? Trying to be a false self is no fun. It's a lot of work. It's an awful lot of work. It leads to identity confusion. Who am I? My wife, who's in heaven because she had a heart attack. She absolutely did not know who she was because she had spent so much time taking care of everybody else. It leads to feeling disconnected from yourself and from God. No good result comes out of it. The unfortunate truth is most people don't even realize they're living as a false self because it feels so normal. It feels so familiar. And it's all they've ever known. It's all you've ever known. It's all I've ever known until I basically, had new information that I'm giving you today. Hope you're taking notes. Now, there's a biblical context, and as I mentioned before, the biblical context is the old self, the identity shaped by painful childhood events, not God's truth. God's desire is to heal the wounds which created the false self. That's his desire. Jesus came, as I said in Luke 4:18, to heal the brokenhearted, to set them at liberty that have been bruised, and to set the captives free. I want to share with you now something that will be extremely practical and very helpful to you. 10 signs you're living from the false self, not your true self. Take notes. This is very important information. Your response to your relationships. Here's what the false self does. You adapt, you perform, or you shrink and become invisible to avoid rejection. You lose yourself. This is the second one. You lose yourself in relationships so you can hide your real emotions. Those are two. Each one of these is going to be two of the false self and two of the real self. So here's the true self, or real self. You are authentic. Your true authentic self. You feel safe and secure enough to express your needs, feelings, and boundaries. See, the false self doesn't have any boundaries. Your motivation. What is your motivation behind all your actions? The false self, you do things to be liked, to be accepted, and to be approved. That's why you do them. That's the motivation. Your value depends upon how you perform. Oh my gosh. So many people in the church are doing this. They're trying to earn their way with God. They're trying to perform because they're a false self. Your true self, you act from purpose and conviction and peace. That's why Jesus said, let the peace of God rule in your heart in Philippians. You know you're loved apart from what you achieve or what you do. You know you're loved for who you are, not what you do. Now, how do you handle emotions? Well, the false self, you suppress them, you numb them, you disconnect from your feelings. I have too many people that I'm working with. I say to them, well, how does that make you feel? And they have no idea because they disconnected to protect themselves. You pretend you're fine even when you're hurting. This happens in the church all the time. How are you doing? I'm fine. How are you doing? Boom. Nobody ever tells anybody how they really are. And that's a problem. So your true self, handling emotions, you can feel and you can name your emotions. See, that's the problem. If you can't name your emotions, you're going to be continue to be a false self without being controlled by them. You don't need to be controlled. You don't need to fear emotions. You allow God to meet you in your emotional reality. Ooh, isn't that good? You allow God to meet you in your emotional reality. What do you do with boundaries? Well, what the false self does is you overgive. You say yes when you really mean no. You avoid confrontation. Oh, I have so many people that avoid confrontation. With boundaries, what does the true self do? You have healthy boundaries with confidence. That means you have a wall and a gate. You let people in to your inner being, in your inner world, but they have to be safe. They can't be stepping on your feet while they're talking to you. They have to be safe. You understand that protecting your heart is biblical and it's very wise. It's very important. Protect your heart because out of that come the issues of life. So you want to protect your heart. And that's why you have good boundaries. Now, what's the false self do about identity and self-worth? Well, you define yourself by your past. Oh, I have too many people that do that. Define yourself by your past, your mistakes, and what the others think about you. Mistakes, past, and what others think about you. You constantly compare yourself to others. Comparison is a death blow in trying to be a real self. It won't work. So identity and self-worth for the true self, the true you, is you define yourself by who God says you are. Who does God say you are? Loved, accepted, my child. Oh, it's really all in there, in the Word. You walk in confidence. You don't need to be competitive. You don't need to put others down so you can come up. You don't need to look better than you because you are competitive. You're trying to beat somebody else out for the job or whatever. What does the false self do with relationships with God? This is a very important one. The false self says you try to earn God's approval. That's what's happening in the church all over the place. You hide or withdraw from God when you fail, just like Adam and Eve did. They failed. They disobeyed God. And they hid in the trees. Okay? They covered themselves. Okay? That's what people are still doing today. Just covering their face or who they are. Because they don't believe they're valuable, important, or worthy. The truth self, when it comes to relationships with God, the true self rests in God's unconditional love. You're approved with honesty. You're approved by Him, so you're honest with Him, and you're not performing. You're vulnerable with God. You're transparent with God. You tell Him how you feel. You're not performing. So how does the false self deal with reaction to failure? That's a big one. We're all going to fail. We're all going to make mistakes. So how does the false self relate to failure? The false self, failure feels like a verdict on your worth. You spiral into shame, self-criticism, or anxiety. Oh, I've seen so many people do that. I used to do that. When I made a mistake, I used to hit myself. Can you imagine that? Boy, I sure don't do that now. I love myself. I really like who I am. Yes, I make mistakes. I'm a human being. I'm not a human doing. I make mistakes, but I forgive myself and go back and do it again. I learn from my mistakes. Hope you're learning from your mistakes. Communication. How does the false self communicate? You make decisions on fear. You make decisions based on fear, pressure, time pressure, or people pressure, and you try to people please. You speak from fear, frustration, or defensiveness. Boy, was I defensive. I was really defensive. The true self communicates this way. You communicate with honesty, clarity, and emotional maturity. Why? Because you've been healed. The true self, you cannot get to true self without healing the emotional wounds. You speak truth in love, not fear. Just like the Bible says, speak the truth in love. In decision making, how does the false self make decisions? You make decisions based on fear. Oh, I already said that. Let me repeat this. Let me go back to this one. You second guess your intuition and God's leading. You second guess. The first one was fear, pressure, and people pleasing. The second one is you second guess yourself and God's leading. The true self, on the other hand, makes decisions based from alignment with God's truth. His word is true. You move with peace, not panic. And finally, daily experience with life. The false self, life is heavy, exhausting, disconnected, and overwhelming. I know too many people in that case. And you are surviving, just surviving, not thriving. Your true self, life feels meaningful, hopeful, and aligned. You are living, not just coping. Please remember, the false self is created out of emotional wounds you experienced as a child. It was created subconsciously by you. The problem is, an adult, if you're living from a false self, you are causing yourself problems. You're going to have less joy. Your true authentic self is built from the truth that David speaks about in Psalms 139, 13 and 14. For you created my innermost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb, and I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. So this passage emphasizes God's intimate involvement in forming your life in the womb, because you are fearfully and wonderfully. You're unique. You're one of a kind. Stop and think about it. Fingerprints, one of a kind. You were made by God to be uniquely you. Satan has come along and he has tried to influence your identity, and he's done that by bringing pain. So Satan continues through every generation to keep this thing going. Through every baby born, he wants to separate men and women, babies and infants and toddlers from God. That's his whole plan. He does this by attacking your identity, what you believe about yourself, and what is so difficult for all of us is to know when we're living in a false self. Too many people have lived in the false self for too long. So what I want for all of you is to know what the truth is about your identity. What is the false self? And I want you to have a choice to become more the person God created you to be, so you can do what God created you to do. You got to be before you do. That's why I'm doing a deep dive into identity and false self. Please take what I brought you today, review it, go over it, ask God to show you, am I a false self? Am I living below your plan for my life? Because I know you probably are, and you can change by getting healed and having a great life. And God wants that for you.